Right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this week to DoD Contract Academy, the podcast. This week, we have a really special episode. I'm talking with Dr. Martin Ettenberg of Princeton Infrared Technology. Sir, how are you today?
I am very good, thank you.
Good. Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm looking forward to it. So
Good. Well, you're going to be in some really good company because, I know you guys, first of all, have a long history with the SIBR process, but you're also in a really interesting technological space, which we'll get into. And I think that's going to be of interest as well. But maybe before we dig into that, I think I'd love to learn a little bit more about you, and so would the audience. So maybe you could give us a kind of a brief background on yourself and your education and how you came to Princeton Infrared Technologies.
okay, I'll try to be brief, but when somebody talks about themselves, it starts to get long-winded.
Uh,
So undergrad at Cornell University in material science, went on to graduate school at University of Virginia, got my master's and PhD actually in semiconductor materials dealing with thermoelectrics, which are little devices that semiconductor heat pumps.
mhm.
Electricity through one side gets hot, one side gets cold. And actually, it was a Navy project for cooling systems on submarines back when we were working on CFCs replacements, and they weren't there yet. And the Navy got panicked and was trying everything.
What's
Uh,
a CFC?
CFC was a fluorocarbon. It's used for it was replacements for refrigerant gases.
Okay,
When there was a hole in the ozone layer and we were trying to the Navy had to get rid of all their refrigerants and they had to switch off. So thermoelectrics is a great idea because submarines have a giant heat sink being the ocean, and they have a huge power plant in the back to supply as much electricity as possible. So thermoelectrics weren't a bad solution, but they came up with a refrigerant that worked. So
okay, good.
but it led me to my first job at a company called Sensors Unlimited, and they were doing optoelectronics in-gas detector arrays, and they had a thermoelectric cooler underneath, and they needed some help with the thermoelectric coolers. And I had a semiconductor background, and I then started to learn about electro-optics and SWIR imaging, and I got into it, and I never left. So started off as a bench scientist, and then became I'll say, technical program manager. So I was doing program management as well as technical stuff and development. And then I wanted to do more things. And we were a small business. And my boss said, "All right, go out and get money. Go write proposals." And so I said, "Okay." And so I started winning more proposals than I could do. And then I moved to business development, actually, and started doing sales and business development, and really enjoyed that because I was one of the few business development people that actually really understood the technology, and so I could write really well. Oh, my writing was never good, but I could write. I could write technically good proposals, and other people could correct my English. And did director of research and development, director of business development, and was
Okay.
doing that for a very long time. And then Sensors Unlimited was acquired by Goodrich Corporation. And I realized after working there a couple of years, Goodrich was a great company, but big company culture wasn't for me. I
Right.
didn't enjoy it. And so I left and started dabbling in some other companies for a while, but kept getting calls for consulting on shortwave infrared. And the question was always, what's going on at Sensors Unlimited? That was always question number one. And then question number two, which I didn't know the answer because I had left a couple of years. And then question number two is, why are these in-gas detectors so expensive? And by the third or fourth phone call, you start thinking, well, I think there should be a business here.
Ah,
And so started putting the business plan together, and got some angel investors together, and won some small SBIRs. And I'll admit, I was very unsuccessful at Sensors Unlimited winning SBIRs. The joke was I was 2 for 20, and people would actually take my proposals. Other people in my group would take my proposals and rewrite them slightly, and they would win.
ah.
Same idea. So
Well,
I
hey,
was
let me ask you this. I don't want to cut you off because,
sure.
first of all, that's 10% of your SIBR proposals winning. Actually, isn't bad, right? I mean, you're probably beating
Uh,
the odds.
Now it's not bad. I agree with you. Back then, I think the percentages were higher.
Okay.
Now you're right. More people writing SBIR proposals. So I think the percentages now, you're right. They're around 10. I think it's 10 to 12% now win
Yeah.
rate. Um, we've been a little more successful here. We're probably on phase ones. We're probably somewhere around the 20% range.
Okay.
Um, the
I mean,
phase twos were probably much higher. We're much higher than that. We're like 65 range.
I definitely want to get into that, but so I just want to back up a little bit because you did say you were like really successful at going and getting money for unlimited funding. Was that federal funds that you were winning, or
Yeah, oh, it was federal and commercial. So I was federal funds. I was applying to broad area announcements,
okay?
BAAs. Uh, we were going after those quite a bit, and then on the commercial side, it was commercial development for new detector arrays, more modification of our current detector arrays. Since the federal government can afford big projects in the couple $1 million, but the commercial entities were more of modifications in the hundreds of thousands,
Okay,
or tens of thousands.
right.
But they usually led to um, big buys of, and the commercial entities, it would be like, oh, modify the camera to do this for 40, 50, 100,000, but then they'd end up buying 30 of them or 40 of them.
Okay, good.
One of them was, for instance, working with Raytheon to put shortwave infrared on a gimbal to
Hmm.
go on a big UAS. And so it took a long time, but we had to mill harden it to get it on board and fit it into the right size and shape because it's going on a gimbal to go into their system.
Sure. Now, were you able to use funding, because you have federal funding and you had commercial funding coming in? Were you able to use that to basically develop technology that could be used for dual use?
Yes, there was always, always the goal. So, and I still hold that in my programs here at Princeton Infrared Technologies. Is um, we we only do a research program if we walk away with something from it that's useful commercially.
Sure.
If not, I will admit the engineering geeky side of me really gets into it and is willing to do it. But I'll admit the business side of me on the other side is always saying we have to walk away with a piece of technology. It doesn't have to be the greatest piece, but it has to be something we care about and we want to use.
Right.
We just had an Air Force program, closed out Air Force Phase 2 to develop a 2.1 micron detector array.
Hmm.
And it was built in a different format, but we walked away with knowing how to build that kind of detector technology. Now we've commercialized it, and it's a BP in our what we call our BP cam. It goes out to 2.1 microns, mostly for laser beam profiling. And we've now sold a couple of them, commercialized that technology, and we have interest from NASA for a space mission for that same detector array.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
working towards that. And the Air Force developed the technology, and it's being sold into a Navy program. So,
Yeah. It
yeah,
happens all the time.
and it's great stuff when it happens. Like,
Yeah.
kudos to both organizations.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the point, right? I mean, if people aren't listening to the criticism on SBIR, the criticism is often we use it, a company gets funded, and then the technology doesn't go anywhere. So the real key is, hey, how can we utilize that anywhere in the services or the IC or wherever or NASA to make use of the funded technology?
I agree, and a lot of it in our cases, sometimes these programs don't go anywhere, and but the technology, we always take the technology and make it go somewhere, and it's a learning lesson.
Right.
We've had we've had a camera with a program with Missile Defense Agency. It was gun hardened, so it literally could be fired from a cannon. Uh, Tens of thousands of G's of shock force. the program didn't go anywhere, but has led to more programs now. The Army has interest now. The Navy's looking at it, and we're utilizing that technology and things learned,
Sure.
and it's pushing the technology forward, which has been great.
Yeah, one of the I guess the biggest problem sets that I hear from companies that have gone through SBIR, SBIR phase two, and you're a lot further ahead than a lot of these businesses, but a lot of them are just starting out. They maybe win the phase one, they grab the phase two, maybe multiple phase twos, but they're trying to get to either that funded contract with the government or a program of record somehow. And it sounds like what you're doing, and we had someone else on the show previously who basically said, hey, I like to use the government funding to help develop the technology for dual use and then keep my commercial line coming in to fund me when the government isn't. Then the government will catch up eventually and we'll get there. What do you think of that philosophy of kind of utilizing SBIR and moving forward in tech development?
I'm going to tell you that is my philosophy.
Okay.
Because um, I like to joke. The government doesn't probably like my joke, but I have never seen a phase three. I've been doing
Yeah.
government research for 25 years. I've never been offered a phase three. I've never seen a phase three. I hear people talking about phase threes.
Hmm.
I don't even know a company. I have to correct that. I met one company that got a phase three, but I've only met one company in my entire career that says they've had a phase three. I
Yeah.
don't, for me, they feel like unicorns. Like
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that's gotten them. That my philosophy is we take the phase two and we utilize those developments, we commercialize them, and they morph into something else. Like that program I was talking about with the gimbal system.
Hmm.
It was the technology was developed in an SBIR for a 640 by 512 array. The
Right.
small camera format was developed relatively in an SBIR, and it morphed into this commercial product, and then the commercial product then went into this military system. It wasn't a phase three. It wasn't, but the pull was there. Now it took a lot of time, and thank God there is dual use. Like
Yeah.
that's the problem, and I always get upset about. And I'll admit it's got much better on ITAR restrictions
Hmm.
because it makes it hard for dual use technology. Like the government always wants things cheaper and better, right? And I'm happy to get it to them, but you need that pull, that commercial pull, and sometimes it's
Sure.
in our case machine vision applications or spectroscopy or astronomy or all these other things, but it's hard to sell to those when there's these big military DoD ITAR restrictions around them. But
Yeah.
the military has their own version of things. Like it became that version of the camera that was specialized became a that's an ITAR item, right? It was
Mhm.
built for a specific purpose, but the
Right.
general technology should not be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, for the government, just put my government hat on. We had a lot of great reasons for wanting dual use, mainly because if it only existed in a government weapon system, for instance, that meant that anytime we wanted an upgrade, an update, a software modification, anything that we needed, just routine maintenance, that means we had to put someone on contract to do it, right? Probably the company that created it. Versus if it's something that also exists to some extent commercially, well, now like maybe routine software updates and things like that, it might be getting modified along the way, right? So when it comes time for us to want something, all of a sudden we can go get the latest thing. We don't have to wait 2 years for a development or something along those lines. So it depends on the technology and exactly what we're talking about. But I mean, there are a lot of good reasons for having a software or technology that's dual use.
Yeah, I can say hardware too. Just as you build more of them, you get better at it, and
Right.
the product gets better. Longer lifetimes, improved sensitivity, whatever you may look at. The more you build, the better it gets. So you get
Absolutely.
smarter at it. So I'm a very big fan of dual use. But yes, your philosophy holds because as I said, phase threes to me are like unicorns.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good way for a company to get the foot in the door. It's a great way to find some development dollars where somebody doesn't own a piece of your company at the end of the day.
I agreed.
It's also a really good way, and even a lot of contracting officers and program managers on the government side don't understand this, but a CIBR contract, if you're a phase two graduate, that gives the government a way to sole source contract with you that is very easy as long as you can explain it to them. And so, I mean, it gives you another option. And making it easy for the government is always a good thing. Even if they're not going to use it, just being able to explain it to them and say, hey, there is this option, there is this past performance, there's this technology.
You know, I will admit I probably haven't leveraged that enough. Like we use our phase twos uh, as marketing, for lack of a
Sure.
better word. The idea that we have this technology, that we can do this technology, that we can do these things and be beneficial. Um, I like to think of it as more marketing then, but it is an interesting avenue we have not pursued of pushing that. But we haven't gotten to the point where we're being put on systems.
Okay, gotcha. And what I was just looking away. I wasn't not listening to you, but one thing I did not do
No,
was I didn't look for to see if you were on any contract vehicles like GSA or
no, we're not at that point.
anything.
We're most of the things we're doing are um, development right now at Princeton Infrared Technologies. We're developing next generation technology, infrared imaging and the shortwave infrared. Um,
Okay,
we have, there are shortwave infrared imagers that are deployed, uh, but not in large numbers yet. And we were looking at that. Everything from um, hypersonic munitions,
hmm,
regular munitions, as well as UASs for uh, targeting, as well as new hyperspectral systems, so you can find targets and ID those targets.
sure. I mean, there's tons of different options for you guys. I mean, from JADC2 and all the services all the way down. So definitely no lack there. I was wondering, just going back a little bit to the broad area announcements, right? So I know how I utilize them on the Air Force. I mean, that's something we actually don't talk too much on this podcast, but so it may be helpful for people listening to understand how they work for you. I know the way I used it was not the way you're supposed to use it, though I sense that other offices are using it. So we would keep a BAA open. You might see a broad area announcement open, and it doesn't have a due date like a typical like RFP or SIVR would. It might say it's open for 3 years, and it's a broad topic area, and it basically says, hey, write your proposal for this topic area. I left it open. A lot of the reason for that is it allowed us to put a company on contract really fast to do some research, constrained research. What was your experience kind of going after the BAAs, and how did you make that work for you?
So there were two types. The one you just discussed, which was the really broad ones, where we'd be working with um, somebody from, Army, like Night Vision Labs, or somebody at Air Force Research Labs. Those were big ones. I guess once in a while at NRL, and yeah, they would have uh, a research topic they were interested in that we could fit into those BAAs. And we were a small company, so we weren't going after the tens of millions, or
Right.
the even couple millions. Those were, $500,000 to $1 million contracts, right? And those would fit nicely in those BAAs. And that was one avenue where we kind of went after it. The other one was um, BAAs, like a DARPA BAA, where they were looking for some. I'm gonna say, well, with DARPA, it's always a nutty idea, but something, something where it's really pushing the envelope, and we would go after those. And our strategy was, because we were a small company, we kind of went for the dollars that fell off the table when the big boys were done counting them.
Okay.
So the big boy, they'd be like, oh, we're going to issue 2 contracts or 3 contracts in this giant thing, right? And they'd all be fighting over the tens of millions of dollars, right? And it wouldn't divide up all nicely, right? But there were probably some small areas of research where you tickle somebody's fancy at the program management level, and you could grab uh, some of those research dollars for something that was very specific in those niche areas, and we go for those. Or
Yeah.
we'd be the small business that would go for a BAA where they'd fund the Lockheed and the Raytheon, and then they'd have the Sensors Unlimited, with a
Hmm.
much smaller amount, with a much higher risk solution.
Sure.
They'd be swinging for the singles or doubles on the BAA, and we'd be swinging for the fences, right?
Hmm.
And we were the high risk alternative. It was kind of like an SBIR in short, and that was the other way of doing it.
Would you
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was going to say when you would write, because usually it's basically a white paper that you're writing,
Yes.
kind of to nail those down. Would you reach out and talk to somebody in the program office before you wrote something, or would you just write the right white paper and shoot it off and see what you got?
Um, it was dependent. So I will. I'll tell all your listeners on SBIRs, and I should probably, I'm going to give away one of my secrets. I always call
Yeah,
and speak to the technical point of contact. There's only so much they could put into that paragraph
exactly.
or 2 paragraphs, and we always try to call on those BAAs. Um, they were hard because by the time the BAA came out, usually you couldn't talk to anybody.
Yeah,
And you had to be and that's why I think the big boys have the advantage, because they have business development people that are out all the time. We're
right.
not like I can't be. I'm a one-man show, right? Like I see things that come up, I'll call them up, and that's mostly why we're going after SBIRs, because they come out, you can talk to the sponsor, you can find out what they're really looking for and get some insight if you're knowledgeable in the area, and really gear it for what they want.
Right.
um those BAAs, they're tough now because you had to have geared what they wanted before the BAA came out.
Yeah. No,
And if you're hearing about the BAA, you're probably on the late side. So yeah, we would go to the talk. They usually have a public opening talk to talk about it, and you find out more, and you take a big swing.
yeah.
And those BAs, I don't go for them as much now because I will say infrared imaging technology is a lot more mature than it was
Sure.
when I was doing this 15, 20 years ago. We were at the beginning of the infrared imaging era, so there was a lot of money around, and uh, BAs I can win into. Now they're less common. They're more system goals, and I'm not a system guy.
Sure.
I turned photons into digital counts, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of I give the information, the picture to somebody, and they have to do something with it.
You know what strikes me as unique about you in particular is that you are an engineer, but you are also a really good seasoned business developer on the federal side. So, and I can see how, and I think a lot of people lose this, especially when they try to hire somebody to write a proposal for them for anything. Having that in-depth understanding of the technology is crucial. It's absolutely crucial if you want to win, and especially if you've talked to them, like you said, you probably get half the information, if that, on like any proposal, really. So if you have the ability, and that's why it's so important to find out about any proposal before it actually officially comes out, so you can talk to somebody, but outside of Civer. But yeah, I mean, having that ability to understand the proposal writing process, the business development process, and the technology itself is probably why you've won so much, because you can write a really compelling offer that touches on exactly what they want.
Not to toot my own horn, but yeah, I agree with you. I'm tough on business development guys
Yeah,
because I feel a lot of them don't understand the technology. Like, I appreciate the business development guys that are former operators and soldiers and,
sure.
sailors and airmen. Because they have the side that I don't have. Like, as I said, I understand how to turn these photons into digital counts, and I know how to do imaging, and I know
Right.
all that, but I don't understand the con-ops, right? Like, they understand the concept of operations, that they've been in the field. Like, I'll talk about, oh, we can do laser spotting. We understand the PRF codes. We can see this, and they really understand what's going on. Like, they understand the whole concept of operations when they
Right.
use the laser guided munition, right? And I don't I don't understand that. And that's, I'll admit, that's my weakness on these things. And I appreciate business development people on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
When I was at Goodrich, it was my favorite thing was actually going down to the DC office, because it was all filled with former colonel, captains, and generals who been there, done that. They had trouble understanding the technology, but they understand the concept of operations. And two of us working together
It's a good team.
was a really great team. It was fantastic, and I really appreciated it. Um, um, that I understand, but you're right. Just having a business development person not understanding technology. I believe, especially in these technology plays, you really have to understand technology, if not the system end of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think that's helped me. My engineers joke around that I turn to the dark side because I do a lot of sales stuff. But I'll admit, I do, as much as I enjoy solving engineering problems, I also like being creative and knowing what the technology can do.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets me excited.
Well, and I mean, look, I could just putting myself back in that seat. Like, I don't know how many companies would come in and talk to me about what they had, but I was talking to the sales guy usually, at least in the beginning, right? I wasn't talking to someone that had the true grasp of what was going on. Um, but to your point, and this is for like the military guys out there that are listening, maybe thinking of transitioning. It's a really great career field if you want to be, when you're transitioning business development in the public sector for exactly your point. And I mean, to have the first half of my career, for instance, I flew reconnaissance aircraft, right? So, that has helped me exponentially, on the outside working with companies. If I was in BD for exactly the reason you're talking about, I might not be able to talk all of the cyber engineering speak for a cybersecurity company, but I certainly understood circular error of probability and what the what we needed to do to execute a mission where someone was going to potentially be hurt or taken out, or we had to do something in the Pacific Theater. I mean, usually that's the gap, right? So there's another language there that a lot of the service members speak that maybe the companies don't, and so you can kind of bridge that gap and learn about
Yeah,
technology.
but I think it's a great thing. Also, you know how to maneuver around within the DoD. Like,
Right.
forget about acronyms, which is a whole other problem. But
Yeah.
where in the service sectors and how things work, and it is a great skill. You're right, and if they can pick up the technology, enough of the technology, it's fantastic. I try to go the other way. Like, as you said, I try to figure out, circular error probability for bomb dropping and so forth, and understanding all those things, which are important, right?
Right.
But understanding both sides. But yes, the only thing I wish somebody, as an engineer, I went to engineering because I wasn't very good at writing. And I'm going to tell you, oh, most of my life is filled with writing. So
Yeah.
if there are any,
Ironic.
if you have anybody, the younger people listening on this, it's like take another writing course.
Yeah. It's very important. It's very important because
It's unbelievably important.
honestly, no matter how great your business development is, no matter how great the technology is, and I've said this before, and I've gotten some flack for it about how I usually knew what company I wanted to hire before solicitation ever went out, but I always didn't get to hire that company, and that's the point that usually gets missed, right? And the reason is there's a whole market research phase we don't have to talk about now, but which is where that would happen. No one's going to put a solicitation out without understanding that there's a company that can do the work, and especially in the technology realm. So just by virtue of that, everyone's, no matter how many federal acquisitions regulations exist and competition laws, we're all human and we're going to have our preferences, especially if the market research had us talking with a company like yours and understanding like, hey, this is a perfect fit. But even if that occurred, speaking to writing, this is a long way of getting back to that question or that statement. You could be exactly who we want to hire. You could have the perfect technology, everything's in place, but you don't write the proposal correctly. All you got to do is, because that gets scored, and it's probably not going to be scored by me as a program manager. It's going to be scored by a contracting officer, and contracting officers don't run these programs. That's something a lot of people don't realize. They're warranted to put you on contract, and then they're on to the next thing. And then a lot of time, bigger ones, there's a team of people reviewing it, and if you're not paying attention to things like compliance matrices, and if you're not really understanding the nuance of what the fire clauses are and everything in there, then you could lose that despite all of the great work. So yeah, writing is extremely important.
No, I 100% agree with you. If you can't communicate your ideas and you miss something in the, reading the solicitation, you miss putting in, certain section that they want, you're right, you get killed on the score. We've lost SBIRs where you read the review and everybody's like, it's great. And you're like, I don't understand why
Yeah.
I didn't win. It's probably because you missed something, right, that affected your score.
Have you ever submitted an STTR?
Yes. We've done one or two.
Okay.
We do work quite a bit with universities. Matter of fact, the university partner is, I'd say, probably on 60% or 70% of our SBIRs.
That's interesting.
The STTRs, the only problem I have with STTRs is it makes it very difficult because of the money denomination levels of working out how much. A lot of times, the university partner isn't doing that much work, but they have to take a whole bunch of the money.
Sure. What is
And
it, like 30 or 40% around there?
yeah, it gets complicated. The university do 30% of the work on say even a $750,000 program is $250,000 in university. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of graduate students.
Sure is. Yeah. I'm sure they'll figure out a way for it. Reason I ask is, just talking about like best approaches. I'm often told that STTR is a interesting way to approach one of these. But by the way, if anyone's not listening, I forget what the acronym stands for, but you basically have to partner with a nonprofit like a university to put one in. But most companies aren't putting those in. Most companies are putting SBIRs in because they don't have to partner with anybody. So I'm told that your odds of winning could be a little bit higher, depending on.
I'm willing to believe that. I think less people apply for the STTRs. They're more complicated in that sense of how you divvy up the work, and depending on what you do. We have looked at STTRs, and we're usually working with our university partners. But as I said, the really tricky part is usually divvying up how you're going to get them at that, whatever it is. I think it's 30% level.
Yeah.
Of funding, especially if we're building something. Infrared imagers and readout integrated circuits are expensive, right? And so you could start. I hate to say play games, but you could start doing things like the university buys some of the pieces of hardware, but as I said, it gets complicated.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's absolutely understandable. So we've talked a lot about SBIRs and BAAs and different approaches, business development approaches, which is really cool. And I know definitely hits the need of a lot of people listening. But what's on the agenda right now for Princeton Infrared? Like, where are you going from here, and what are your goals? And
so as much as I love government research and doing government research because it tickles my science side, we're really pushing on the commercial side of things, selling imagers to commercial entities for machine vision, as well as biological imaging, astronomy, those are kind of the big areas. Laser beam profiling. We do like selling into military systems as well. They're just I'll say, for lack of a better word, it's slow.
Mm. Yep.
Somebody tests you out, you go through a lot of testing, you got to requalify, you got to build up, you got to fit into the system. It's years. Once you get going, uh, it's great, but it takes you a long time to get there. As opposed to commercial systems, we'll be on a factory line looking at sorting coffee beans from rocks. They see the sorting works and they'll go, all right, now we're going to put it on 6 lines, and they'll buy 15, 18 cameras, right? And you're like, well, that's a good day, right? And that took only 6 months to a year to get going from camera 1 to camera 18.
Mm-hmm.
And the development cycles are just faster. And so our big focus right now is we start off with large imaging arrays for I'll say applications that require high sensitivity and high resolution. And now we're actually working now towards lower resolutions. We start off with 1.3 megapixels, which are 1280 by 1024s. Our next product to come out will be a 640 by 512. And then after that, we're going to even go down to a 320 by 256, a very, very small imager, but very, very low cost. And so we think the market's fairly elastic. And if we have, instead of offering a $30,000-$40,000 camera, which is our 1280 by 1024, the 640 will be somewhere around a $10,000 to $12,000 camera. And then the 320 by 256, which we're aiming for, will be a sub $5,000 camera, like a $4,000 camera. And we think there's a lot of elasticity in the market where, like, machine vision people will just buy that kind of camera because it'll just take care of the needs. It'll be low enough cost because they can see something in the shortwave infrared that they can't see in the visible, like blue detergent in a blue bottle.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough for a visible camera to see, but plastic is transparent in the shortwave infrared, and the detergent has a water absorption line because it's mostly water. So you can see the fill level very easily.
That's interesting. What are some use cases? Because I mean, I'm pretty versed on the military side.
So yeah, shortwave infrared.
Side.
When you look in shortwave infrared, things look different. There's a water absorption line at 1400 nanometers around. I shouldn't call it a line. It's pretty broad, but and so things with water in it are very detectable. Like, you can tell the difference between a peach pit and a peach pit and a peach, which are both kind of orangish and hard for a visible camera to tell the difference, especially if you're cutting it out and miss and leave a little bit. But the peach has tons of water in it. The pit does not. And so you can see them very easily, the difference. Detergent, as I said, it's blue detergent, a blue bottle. Really hard to tell the difference, but easy in the shortwave infrared. Paper drying, glass manufacturing. We can see through silicon solar cells to see which are good solar cells and which are bad, where the cracks are.
Oh, interesting. So it could be used by even a service technician to.
Yeah. They're usually in production, but they're also used in afterwards. They'll actually put them on drones and fly over solar fields, and you could actually see which solar cells are in distress or had problems, especially after like a hailstorm where they may get broken and so forth. So there are lots of things you can't see in the visible, but you can see in the shortwave infrared. Military, obviously, because camouflage is made to fool your eyes. Doesn't do great in shortwave infrared. We can see all the lasers on the battlefield in whether it's a laser used with night vision goggles, 106 laser designators, 155 laser rangefinders. All those are seen with these indium gallium arsenide shortwave infrared detectors. And so,
a ton of military application for sure.
Yeah, tons of military, night vision imaging and so forth. But on the commercial side, there's all these, I'll call them spectroscopic signatures, where you can tell the difference between different plastic types for recycling and it's been talked about for years. It hasn't been done because it's hard. Is blood glucose detection
Oh, wow.
without pricking your finger. Um,
Interesting.
Vein and artery detection. If you're going to give somebody an IV, it's easier to find.
Sure.
There's I go on for hours. When you
Yeah.
start looking in this wavelength band, there's a lot of things, and so there's commercial applications, but the price point matters, right? There's a $40,000. You go, well, I'll be able to solve that problem another way, right?
Yeah.
Once you get down to we think 10 or 5, people go, oh, that's a great solution. And this has been seen on long wave microbolometers. So most people have seen the shortwave infrared is just beyond the visible. So things look in the shortwave infrared similar to how they do in visible. They look a little bit different. Like skin color goes dark, hair goes
Mhm.
white, assuming you have real hair.
Right. I
If
can't.
you
I
have a
can't speak
toupee.
to it.
Yeah, if you have a toupee that comes out black, it's always embarrassing at a trade show when we have to tell people their hair isn't real.
Ah.
Uh, but these things look different. And most people are familiar with infrared because of long wave infrared, which is body heat.
Right.
Shortwave infrared doesn't see body heat unless it's above 150 degrees. We don't really 150 C. We don't detect it. But long wave, you see body heat. Now, people are familiar with those because microbolometers, because what they were developed for the military for night vision systems, they've
Right.
gotten really, really cheap. And you can now go to Home Depot, buy a microbolometer, small, low resolution, 128 by 128 or 320 by 256, and you can walk around your house and look for heat leaks or bad electrical switches,
Right.
or they're putting it. They monitor engines and motors, right? Like you can stare at a motor and just have this camera stare at a motor, and when the motor gets too hot, you know it's about to fail. So now
Hmm.
you switch the motor, right? Instead of
Right.
waiting for it to fail and then everything going to
Yeah.
crap at
So
once.
there's a
It's
ton.
preventive maintenance, right? And so, and these cameras are now cheap enough at a couple hundred to $1,000. They find applications for them, and we think the same thing will hold to shortwave infrared, and
Good.
that's kind of what we're looking at.
Awesome. I mean, that's super interesting. So, if there is another company or someone in the government side that wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Oh, you can email me at martin.ettenberg@princetonirtech.com. You can go to our website and drop us an inquiry. We'll see it immediately at princetoninfraredtech.com. Yeah, I think those are the two easiest ways to get in
Yeah.
touch with me.
Okay.
I'm happy to take any and all emails, and
Awesome. Well,
always willing to talk to people about. Uh, I'm willing to talk about anywhere in the infrared. I even teach an infrared course in the machine vision um, class at AIA. So
oh,
um,
interesting.
I'm always happy to talk about infrared, especially shortwave infrared. But I'm willing to branch out into the other
Ah,
bands.
well, you guys heard it here first. So, if you want to learn anything about infrared, Dr. Martin Ettenberg is the guy to talk to. And now you have his contact information, so you could just hit him up and ask him for all the details. Hey, I got one last question for you. So, and I
Sure.
ask everyone this. So, for the businesses out there that are just getting started in federal, whether it is maybe they've been trying and failing at it, or maybe they're just getting into it, what would your advice be for them?
Um, oh my God.
Yeah, just take everything you've learned over the past 20 years and put it into
Yeah, I put it into one sentence, right? Uh, I think selling to the government, I feel is not very much different from selling to commercial entities. You have to talk to your customer and find out what they want. These technical program managers and TPOCs and they have a job and they have a mission, right? And they're trying to achieve some goal, right? And so
right,
you wanna you wanna figure out what it is that they makes their life easier and better, right? It's the same as commercial, right? Like, I'm trying to sell these commercial cameras because people are having trouble solving the problem with visible cameras, right? They're trying to see something they can't see with their eyes and they're having a tough time. And so we sell them a shortwave infrared camera and go, look, now you can see it. And I think it's the same thing with the government customers. They have they have a technical problem they need solved, right? And you got to figure out what that problem is, and talk to them, and the difference between government and commercial sector is commercial. You hand them a quote or a proposal, and they're good to go, and they like you, and they like it. They just go with it, right? And
Right.
the government side, you got to jump through a lot more hoops, right? Like there's got to be fair competition. There's got to be a whole bunch of people that go for it, and so you have to be aware of the of the dance you have to do. But in the end, as we said, there's a guy with a problem or girl with a problem, right? And they want a solution, right? And if you got a great solution, they're gonna want it. If you can make their job and their lives better, that's it. And you just got to figure out. You just got to follow the rules. The problem with the government is there's a ton of rules you got to follow, and they're painful. But once you get through them, it's okay. And listen, you're gonna lose a lot. I think I lost my first 10 SBIR proposals, and I was in a really bad streak. I won a couple BAs, which were much bigger in dollar amount, but SBIRs did horrible for a while. And it took me a long time to learn how to write and figure out how to get them correct. And listen, you're gonna. I like to joke around. My generation and the next generation, we've had this problem that all us high achievers have to get A's all the time, and we weren't taught that you can fail once in a while, and that failing actually will teach you a whole bunch of things. But
Sure does. Yep.
You fail a lot, you will learn what not to do. Problem is, if you keep getting A's and winning, you don't learn what.
Right.
You just keep doing what you're doing.
And I think you mentioned it. I mean, when you fail, a lot of times, whether it's a SIB or anything else, a lot of times you can request a review afterwards and get that advice, and that's critical to learning.
I agree. Always write for the advice. If they'll give you feedback, take it. Now, a lot of times, I think it's BS, and they had somebody else in mind. But you'll always learn something, even through the BS. They'll point out something. You'll be like, "Oh, I didn't think of that. I'll keep that in mind for my next proposal."
Right. Exactly. I mean, you gave a lot of great points there, and I'll just sum it up for everyone what I heard. So, one is make sure you talk to somebody on the other side if you can. Sales is about talking to people, understanding the problem set, talk to the PM, talk to the TPOC, be persistent in the beginning. All right. You mentioned how many times you lost initially, but you can figure out what you did wrong and learn from that. And learn to write is something that you kind of either directly have said or have kind of subliminally said all throughout the interviews.
Yeah, if anybody is if there are any engineering school deans or anything on this podcast listening, we need more writing classes and communication classes in engineering. Like engineers are great at solving problems, and I think we're not great communicators. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think you've ID'd a critical problem set there. But also for the engineers in the audience, you could make amazing business developers, salesmen. You can make amazing, if you own your business, you can be the person doing the selling because you know the information. So like you said, just being able to translate that is a skill. Dr. Martin Nettenberg, thanks for coming on today. We learned a lot from you, and hopefully we can have you on again here in a year or two and see where you are and all the progress that you've made.
That'd be great. If I get my phase 3, I'll give you a call and tell you how it goes. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So, hey, everyone, thanks for listening to DoD Contract Academy this week. Remember, head on over to dodcontract.com. You can check out our 3 programs done for you, done with you, and kind of the do-it-yourself training program. Love to see you in there, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.